I feel like you and I had a running joke because you were always like, I don't want you to write a book about me. And then we would joke around that,
Oh, is that after Devil Wears Prada came
yeah,
out?
and I never signed an NDA. So, and I was like, I'm going to write a book called The Devil Wears Cocoon. I was like, The Devil Wears Prada, whatever. It's all about the Devil Wears Cocoon. And I would always be like, Jill, I'm taking notes, I'm taking notes. But I think our working relationship, we have very good chemistry, and there's something sort of Gilmore Girls about us, which like neither one of us watched because we were too busy working and being out.
Right.
What I also loved about these moments is it was almost like I was waiting for you to come back to war and like tell me stories because you come back from these shoots that were multiple days, which is like now nothing is shot in multiple days.
Right.
And we would touch base here and there, but then I would be like, okay, tell me everything. I still love to this day. I think about how funny your emailing was because you would work 24/7. You obviously be in very different time zones sometimes. And texting wasn't really a thing. You would be emailing and you would have a full conversation with yourself. And I'd like wake up in the morning and it'd be like from 5 a.m. or 5:30. And you would eventually just answer yourself.
This is Going Rogue, and I'm Jill Demling. Today's guest is Andrew Bevan, my former assistant at Vogue. He's the kid from Colorado who won Best Dressed in high school with a style he describes as Gene Kelly meets Winona Ryder. Andrew was always ahead of the trend, confident in his aesthetic when others couldn't understand it, and he is now connecting the cultural dots, working with icons and iconic brands like Grace Coddington and Chanel. From aspiring Broadway star to Teen Vogue Style Director, he proved that sometimes being different is exactly what the industry needs. Let's listen as Andrew Bevan goes rogue. And be sure to head to our Instagram, goingrogue.podcast, to see the images we discussed today. Hi, Bevan.
Hi.
So I have to tell you, I'm typically very anxious before these pod convos. But with you, I'm excited. I mentioned it in your intro, but just want to say again that you are my assistant. And I've told you that you should be honest about what it was like having me as a boss. I will not take it personally because the reality is I was trained by Anna Wintour. So I will blame her for anything you say I did or did not do. But before we start, I would like you to tell us what you do. Us creatives have very long and sometimes very wonky titles and job descriptions because we don't just do one thing. It's not I'm in finance or I'm a lawyer. Imagine if we all could just say I'm a creative, period. But how do you describe what you do when someone asks?
It's so interesting because as I've been venturing into the freelance world, but I've now been freelance since 2017. So I should really have this down pat. But I think my biggest challenge was actually understanding the things that come really natural to me. I don't even think about as assets and I don't even think about as part of my career,
Mhm.
but I've had to like reframe it and be like, this is actually a skill and part of a skill set.
Exactly.
And my brother was someone that said to me that just because something comes easy for you doesn't mean it's not your biggest asset.
Mhm.
And I think part of my problem is I've always been terrible at elevator pitches, which is like shocking that Anna ever liked me because
Which is why your bio is very long.
yeah, I don't care if someone cuts it. But I think I'm a writer, a journalist. I think the hard thing is titles now just seem to be thrown around. And I've never called myself a creative director. And I worked on a project a week ago and I was on the call sheet as creative director. And it wasn't imposter syndrome. I just was like, everyone's a creative director on Instagram.
No, but Andrew, it's very funny that you bring that up because I make a joke sometimes on calls. Sorry if it's sounding like I'm trying to be the creative director, but I think that is something that I feel like I can do it and
Yeah.
that my skill set is the same as what a creative director does. I think we're used to having a title on a masthead, right? So it's very different from other professions that are kind of more general. Like when you say I'm a lawyer, okay, I accept that. I don't ask well, what
Yeah,
kind, you know?
of
But when
course.
you're like reading your masthead title, it's hard to then apply that to the real world outside of a magazine because I still feel like I'm an
Yeah.
entertainment editor, but it's like, what the fuck is that like in the real world? But I know what you mean.
And even that can mean a lot of different things too.
Right.
But
Right.
I don't know. It's like changed my LinkedIn and my resume. First, it said writer, connector, storyteller. But then storytelling became such a cliche thing that everyone was saying, I'm a storyteller, or he does storytelling, or
Yeah.
content creation storytelling. And it just got gross to me and was overused. So I think now it says writer, connector, strategist. And I had producer, and a friend of mine was like, but you can't say that you're a producer. But in my head, I am a
Well,
creative
that's
producer.
tricky too, because producer, we're used to a producer on set, like
Yeah.
what Karen does, and you're definitely not
Not
that.
that, but I've done tons of pre-production, or I'm quite scrappy. So if I'm working on a shoot or something, I don't want to sit around. I want things to go smoothly. And there's a lot
Right.
of producers that aren't keeping track of time, and that's literally their job. So I step in. But yeah, so anyway, I don't know. I veered more the last few years into more marketing and into like ad campaign ideation, which goes into storytelling, whatnot, for everyone from Chanel to like a sourdough bread company.
Mm.
We'll talk about this later because I think it's really rooted in what you and I did and what I learned from you. I became a celebrity whisperer in some way, shape, or form,
Hmm.
able to make celebrities comfortable and get them to say things that are maybe more authentic. I'm not afraid to re-ask a question 10 times to make them not sound um, so staged or so media trained.
Hmm.
And I think just I've gained so much trust with people in relationships. So brands have started to use me as kind of a secret weapon if they have to, Kristen Stewart or Timothy Chalamet or Sarah Jessica Parker to come in and try to get the conversation going. Because I'm never going to make them say something they don't want to say.
Right.
For me, the way that I even ask questions is very conversational, and I kind of talk a lot about myself first. Like, remember interviewing Pharrell a year and a half ago, and I went into this whole tangent about my grandma and Betty White. He was starting his auction company and he was selling things. And I was talking about how my grandma used to have garage sales and then pull everything back into the house and be like, that's not for sale. And meanwhile, I talked for like 3 minutes, and I think Pharrell was like, what is this guy doing? But it disarmed them because it's like,
Yes.
well, he's giving me something. I feel comfortable. I can give him something.
Well, I'll tell you, that's what Jonathan Van Meter, when I had my conversation with him, said. It's about starting it out like two friends talking,
Yes.
not asking
Without
us.
without
Yes.
the note cards, without the phone in
Yes.
face.
He never has a book or a recorder or anything on a table visible during any
Mhm.
of his interviews for Vogue or since Vogue. So I can see you definitely have that talent. It's just, why I ask the question is because it's hard. Like when you
Yeah.
go from one place that's so specific, but you do so much. What do you do with that title after? And how do you translate that masthead title into a real world outside of the bubble of fashion magazine publishing?
Right.
So,
And I think it's a constant like organism. I think it changes continually. And I mean, even today, when I looked at that question, I wrote down bullshit barometer because lately I've been really into like, let's cut the shit. Let's cut the bullshit. What do you want? Like asking people, it might be a marketing campaign or an ad campaign, or even with writing a story for a magazine, talking to the editor or whatnot. What do you want to accomplish here? I was never like that 10 years ago. I was sort of going with the flow and I'll figure it out. But now I want to ask the most simple questions first. And that's where I've been hitting roadblocks of companies and brands and people not knowing sometimes why we're doing this.
yes.
It's often, are we doing this to sell something? Are you doing this for identity? Are you doing it for fun? And people, there's so many cooks in the kitchen
Mm-hmm.
and everything's so saturated now. And they can't really always answer that. And so then I'm like, well, get back to me tomorrow when because help me help
Exactly.
you. So that's my newest thing is bullshit barometer.
That's awesome. Well, if anyone read our emails or text messages leading up to this conversation, they would think we are both nuts. We literally used Vogue covers to figure out the timeline of when you worked for me at Vogue. I sent you 36 Vogue covers and asked you what covers did you work with me on, and that narrowed down the dates. But that's why I use the tag my career in covers, which I really should say my life in covers, because I do remember life events by the cover that was on the stands. Yeah, I'll always remember Sandra Bullock. Pink Ralph Lauren was when I started at Vogue as Anna's assistant. Giselle, VH1 Vogue Fashion Awards, I was promoted. I had my baby, Alicia Vikander by Sims. You know what I mean? And then
all the relationships, the exes, everything.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, like Priyanka was the last cover on the stands when I walked out of the office for the last time. Okay, let's get into it. Okay, I think it's important for the younger listeners, the college kids or right out of college that are looking for a career like yours. And that's many different careers, right? Because you've done so many different things that some of which I'm either blocked out or I don't remember, because I know I always said you came to Vogue off a boat from Colorado. And from your bio, that is not true. And you told me that many times, and I don't know why. I refuse to think you were anywhere before me. So So I know that you grew up in Colorado. And when I was talking to Brian Coates, he was telling me he discovered fashion at age 6 in a small town in North Carolina, watching Style with Elsa Clench. So being from Colorado and me only knowing you as Fabulous Bevan, even I can still remember what you were wearing in the interview. So how did you find fashion? How did you find writing? What was your upbringing like? And how did you get to where you are now from the beginning?
Oh, interesting. Okay. I wouldn't say that I was always obsessed with fashion. I was obsessed with style more than anything. My first kind of entry into that world was very much like old movies. My grandmother lived a house away from me, so I would watch like Gene Kelly and Dick Van Dyke and all the old Marilyn Monroe and Rita Hayworth. And so I kind of understood the idea of fashion from that standpoint, or what it represented. Um, and I was a kid of the 80s, but I was super into things that were retro. I was very into Leave It to Beaver and I Love Lucy and Brady Bunch. And that sort of mixed with what was going on when Gen X kind of came about with Reality Bites and singles and Britpop. And so my kind of vision of style, and I think where my own personal style comes from, is this amalgamation of like Gene Kelly meets Winona Ryder meets.
Yeah, I can do that.
I grew up very preppy. Style was a big component in my upbringing because my mother and my grandmother, they were very stylized. They were very, shoulder pads, a scarf, a brooch. My mother would dress us up for airplanes. Dry cleaning was nothing short of an addiction. Even I had dry clean clothes as a 6-year-old. With this sense of presentation. And it was the 80s, so it kind of goes along with that idea of excess and flash of the 80s.
But in Colorado, I mean, my sister lives there. I mean,
I remember going to school and kids kind of wanting to make fun of me, but then they couldn't because I was actually so confident in my
That's amazing.
Or something.
That's amazing.
And then we would go on these trips, and I think it was more innate, but my mother would curate these family looks. We wouldn't be dressed matching, but if we were in Philadelphia, we'd be wearing Burberry trench coats. If we were my father grew up in La Jolla, so we'd go to Southern California a lot, and we'd be wearing PCH neon hypercolor.
Oh my gosh, your family photo album must be so major.
So I never really put that together until I was an adult and looked back at these photos, and I'm everything looks like a magazine spread in that kind of way. My brothers would run home after church or after wherever we were and put on sweats and be running around it. And I would stay in my outfit. I would stay in a suit all day. I just thought it was so chic. I thought cigarettes were so chic when I was 8. I would take a pen and...
Had you discovered magazines?
I mean, I think I got, because obviously you look back and it's like we weren't digital natives. We didn't grow up with the internet. So I look
Right.
back at like what was I consuming to know who Debbie Harry was or know who, what is what. My brother would get Interview Magazine and GQ. So he was 6 years older than me. So I would look at those. In high school, I remember Paper Magazine. I had a subscription to Entertainment Weekly.
It's funny that you say paper because Jimmy Paul talked about paper and he also talked about being a child in Philadelphia. His mother was a hairstylist, so he was obsessed with just watching her get ready, going to the salon with her. He was not running around with the boys in the neighborhood.
Yeah,
And he said he just found it. It's almost like you just find it. He
find it.
discovered it.
Culture found you back then.
Right,
Certain
right.
way. To his point, I remember going to the beauty salon with my grandmother quite often. I was a really gay little kid until I was about 10. And then I became more of a product of my environment. About 12, 13, I became obsessed with Gen X culture, but I was a little too tiny bit too young. But then like metrosexuality was coming in. I got very into Wallpaper Magazine as like a 14-year-old in Denver. Kind of had this idea what being sophisticated meant. Um, but also modern prep was having this big moment. And like Abercrombie, Tommy, Ralph Lauren, Nautica, and these were all the clothes my mother was buying me, but they were also just fitting the zeitgeist at a certain time. Because I remember seventh grade showing up to school and everybody over that summer came back dressed like my so-called life kind of style with ripped jeans and flannels and stuff. And I was so excited because I had this navy like Ralph Lauren uh blazer with a crest on the pocket. And I had a sweater tied around my neck. And I had like forest green Converse. And I was wearing a rugby shirt, I think, underneath that. And I was still kind of dressed like this cute little preppy kid. And everyone had become suddenly an adult and suddenly into bum equipment and to Guess and Pepe jeans and all this stuff. And I always looked much younger than I was. So I looked like I was 10 and everybody was like going through puberty. I didn't really go through puberty until I was like 20. So
Well, no, but isn't that funny? Like when you talk about what we wore, clothing was something I was super into. But during that, what is it, sixth grade through high school, it really defines you. And it also defines you in a way that you could fit in or not fit in by the fact that you own a Benetton rugby shirt. You know, the fact that you have the blue one, only Meredith Melling, who was in my high school, had the green one. That we had to buy things, we had to wear things to feel like we fit in. That's what people saw. And I don't even know what my style was back then because it was so much about what the trend was that everyone else was wearing until college when I'm going to upstate New York and I'm wearing a Betsy Johnson catsuit. So that was
okay. Did you go
yes, yes. And I'm obsessed with Betsy Johnson at this time because I was going somewhere new. I don't have to dress like Weston High School, but everyone's wearing flannels and hiking boots, and I refuse to do that. But yeah, the Betsy Johnson catsuit in upstate New York wasn't exactly.
I will say that I did get best dressed in my high school, my senior year.
Love it.
And it's interesting because it was something that kind of set me apart, obviously, in elementary school, and something that my brothers, I think, were always possibly a little bit annoyed with my mother, how serious she took us looking. But then I think I used it as like an armor in a certain way.
Yeah, I never even thought about it like that because I only think about it the opposite because going against the grain, you feel vulnerable.
Yeah.
Right? Because of what you're wearing. Because that's the first thing someone's going to see and judge you off of before you open your mouth is what you look like. And most of your body's covered, right? Besides your face. So that's interesting. Yeah, it can be powerful, right? It can change how you feel. It can make you feel great. It can make you feel less than. All of those things, the importance of style. But when did you start writing? Because I know you end up going to NYU for journalism and cinema, and obviously it's clear that you're interested in cinema. I mean, you already had so much knowledge about
Yeah.
the
I was
best
a huge
films.
indie film nerd and it growing up as a teenager, like during that 90s moment of indie film and like Train Spotting and Pulp Fiction and all of that. I was obsessed. I always excelled in English in high school. I liked reading, I liked writing. I was super into high school newspaper and I would write all these investigative reports. And I tell my parents I was doing something else and I go sleep on the street with home with teenagers and like bring them food so they talk to me. And this was my big story was I hung out all night with this group of kids in downtown Denver. And I think I told my parents I was sleeping at a friend's house. And this is pre-cell phone, so this is actually sketchy doing this. And they were showing me like the knives that they had and all this stuff. And they were smoking pot. And back then, pot wasn't legal. So it was much more taboo. But one kid ended up at like 6 a.m. His mother pulled up in a Lexus and picked him up. And they had been panhandling all night. And you would have thought I was going to win a Pulitzer Prize.
Were you the editor-in-chief or?
No, so I had written all the stuff. I also spent a week at an inner city school because I did not go to a diverse school at all. And ironically, when I started at Vogue, people were like, "You went to public high school. What was that like?" Thinking that I went to like the Dangerous Minds school
Exactly.
Piper was in. And I was like, "Oh, everyone drove SUVs and wore Abercrombie. It was like suburban Denver." But I was craving to uncover truths or differences. I had a lot of heart in what I was doing. I spent a week in a school that was primarily Black, and someone from that school spent a week in my school.
Wow.
So I was very obsessed with becoming the editor-in-chief, or at least like the features director. And I did not get either of those positions.
Oh my.
There was
Well,
a bit of like nepo.
I would love to see where those people are now.
No one in that whole staff became a writer at all. And I did get an apology from the English teacher that ran the newspaper probably like 5 years ago.
Wow. Just out of the blue?
Like on Facebook, yes. So that was good. But
Oh my God. So they actually knew that.
yeah,
So this was a
but
thing, like that they said no.
they said
knew how
it
much
was
you
one of the
wanted it.
bigger regrets that they remember. But so that really struck a chord with me not getting it. And so then when you're that young, you're really you're kind of absorbing everything like a sponge. And I think it made me kind of be like, well, if I can't be a top editor at the Green Mountain High School newspaper, how am I going to make it in the world? But that being said, I did end up going to school for journalism. I went to Arizona State University for 2 years and transferred to NYU. Little known fact of people that know me now and people in New York that know me now, but I grew up singing my whole life. I grew up doing musical theater, but it was this kind of thing I was quiet about because also I was like, I play tennis, I do this. I feel like I didn't want to be a theater kid. Like I didn't want that to define me.
Yeah.
But I was just something I was very naturally good at. So there was a part of me that was like, I'm going to be a Broadway star. And my parents were pressuring me to have a career. It's funny because some parents would think a writer or an English major isn't going to be suitable. But because I wanted so bad to be a filmmaker or a Broadway star, they were sort of like, well, okay, you can be a journalist.
I know. Isn't that funny? Having spoken with Adam Green and Jonathan Van Meter, they were raised two different ways. Like Jonathan, his mother said, you just want to be a writer because your friend's a writer. And then obviously Adam, with Adolph Green being his father, that was almost natural that he was going to do something in the arts, writing being one of those things. So
yeah, and what I thought was interesting about Jonathan is he talked about how much, even sometimes being an interviewer, there is this sense of performance, there is this sense of coaching, and
yeah, he was in theater.
Yeah, so I can totally see that there is.
And Adam Green was in theater.
Yeah, I think even just like being thrown into Vogue and the Met Gala and everything, it forced me to not necessarily be nervous sometimes because I did just kind of look at it like. Not a performance in the sense that I was being inauthentic, but it allowed me to maneuver things in a certain way or interact with people that I thought were rude or pretentious or I didn't always connect with. I was able to kind of look at it all like it was some other world in a certain
Mm.
way. But yeah, so I moved to New York. I auditioned to be in like the touring company of Rent. I threatened
What?
to quit college and
That is amazing. Oh, tell me.
got like 4 callbacks. I think I had to fly to LA at one point for some reason because the touring director was in LA. My parents were like forbidding me to do it. So at that one point, I didn't tell them. And then I remember having a really intense conversation with my father, telling him I hadn't even gotten the role. And it's like, I'm dropping out of school to like join the circus.
Wait, so why would your dad be discouraging it if there was a potential that
I
you
think
could?
they were so intent on me getting a college degree.
Okay, so it was about
It's also
dropping out.
that
It was,
era, I
yeah,
think they're still coming off of their parents' era and stuff. You have to get a college degree, then you can do whatever you want.
got it.
It seemed to them that it was me running away for the circus, but they also were like, you didn't get it yet. And I started going to auditions all the time, and I did some productions at NYU, and I auditioned for American Idol the Clay Aiken year, and I got called back like 3 times. It's funny, all these kind of sliding door moments
Yes.
that could have happened or not. I remember I was working at Miramax. I'm skipping ahead, but I was working as an assistant at Miramax, and I like called in sick one day to audition for American Idol. And then I had to go back the next day and I finally had to tell my boss like the truth.
I mean, yeah, so take us through college and then these pretty major jobs, like
Yeah,
right
which
out of
also just
college.
kind of happened by accident in a certain way, which is interesting to hear Jonathan Van Meter's trajectory because I really related to it of just being very present and having things just kind of happen in a more organic way than I think they would happen today with anyone. Because I wasn't strategizing anything. So I went to NYU. My dad got very ill my freshman year of college with brain cancer and was sick for 4 years. So that has a major, I think, play in my just kind of how I handle things and how I didn't want to take anything for granted. And I really focused. But I was also like, I was getting straight A's, but I was going out a lot. And because I felt like, well, if I'm away from home, I need to be living life to the fullest.
Mhm.
And then every other week I was flying home. It was a rough time. And he passed away the summer before my senior year. Then I wanted to take a semester off and no one would let me, like my mom and brothers and grandma and everything. And so I was kind of being pressured to finish my senior year. And a week into my senior year, September 11th happened.
All
It was like a
right.
month after my dad had died. So it was this crazy, it was a lot all in one. They say in movies and whatnot, the summer that changed everything. And it kind of was. And I was really getting in tune with my sexuality and understanding that I was gay. And it was just sort of this amalgamation of many things happening at once.
Was your family supportive of you coming out?
My brothers were, my mother, not initially. I'm actually writing a book about this, but it was of the era. The only thing she knew about gay people were like HIV and
Right.
like drag queens. And, now she says that she always knew I was gay since I was like 3.
I mean, that's what I was thinking.
I wasn't going home for summers. Like, I dress more straight now when I go home to Colorado than I did when I was like 20. I was like, oh, this Vivian Westwood shirt. Like, Denver, Colorado. I feel like I had a lot of emotional experience very young, which I think made me grow up fast. And I ended up getting this production assistant internship at Charlie Rose. And that was so interesting because I was obsessed with that program. And I basically stalked the executive producer and one of the other producers and just kept calling like every other week to try to get an interview. And one of the women works at YouTube now, and she said, finally, I was so annoyed with the fact that you kept calling. I was like, fine, I'll meet this guy. And I met her and she did the whole interview and she was very serious. And she said she was used to people saying things that would impress her or that would be very typical when it came to like people were talking a lot about politics because he would have a dictator on and then he would have Julia Roberts on. And she said, if you could book one celebrity, who would it be? Like, and not one celebrity, if you could book any guest, who would it be? And I, without skipping a beat, said Tammy Faye Baker. but only because I had just watched the documentary about Tammy Faye Baker that RuPaul had narrated, and I think it was at Sundance, and it was getting all these crazy reviews, and I became obsessed with her. And so without skipping a beat, I said Tammy Faye Baker, and she told me like 10 years later, she was like, that was such a strange answer that I couldn't. And she's like, you had such a good explanation for it that I couldn't say no. And I had like 4 other really boring interviews that day. And I was like, I'm going to hire the Tammy Faye Baker guy, which I think goes back to like any advice I would give to anyone younger. Actually saying something authentic can actually help. If I would have said Henry Kissinger, who I did end up having to pick up at the airport and things like that, like for this job, she would have just been like, okay, another person who wants to book Henry Kissinger. Like,
well, that's why I think Anna hired me. I just think the fact that I didn't know who she was, there was no way not to be authentic. I didn't know who she was. I did not read Vogue. What am I going to answer? That's going to be what everyone else answers. Yeah. I'm not going to say, I love the piece you just did on, or say how much I love Oscar de la Renta. I did not know who I was talking to. And I think because of that, I didn't have any guard up. I didn't have any nerves. It was just like, hey, what's up? And that was, yeah.
I think it's also like you're using being green or not knowing everything to your advantage. Mm-hmm. You own it.
You don't have time to prepare to pretend to be someone else.
Exactly.
Right? Because people can see through that.
Yeah. Exactly. But I was going to say, though, aside from wanting to be a Broadway star, when I was a little child, I desperately wanted to be a talk show host. I would sit with my stuffed animals in the basement and trying to be like a Johnny Carson and on my Fisher Price like tape recorder. And then I think late high school into college, because of Sex and the City and because I discovered Woody Allen, I was like very into New York, and I thought I wanted to do PR, or I thought I wanted to be Carrie Bradshaw. Like, and then I did a PR internship at Ralph Lauren, and I was like, I don't really want to do PR. Like,
right. You're like anything in this world. And I think these are the jobs that are in this world. It's like, because
there was a lot of like figuring it out. And I think that, but what I learned from that PR internship is the first day I showed up, or the second day, my boss said to me, you ask so many fucking questions. Why do you ask so many fucking questions? Figure it out. You need to have a brain to know when to ask a question and what you can figure out yourself.
Yes, amen.
Amen. I said, okay, but I went home that night. I cried, but it was the best advice that someone that's ever given me that I carried throughout my whole career, even working for you. I've had assistants that I wanted to say that to, that I feel like I can't or something. And it's like, don't ask me the address. You can get the address.
Yes. No, I used to say, like, if I can find the answer quicker than you, I don't need an assistant.
Yes, exactly.
It's like, if I'm having to do it and then tell you how to do it, then I might as well just do it. But having read your resume, I had blocked out anything you did before me. It was crazy that you worked for 2 Me Too'd men. So looking back, what was the culture like looking back? Because I know when we're in it, we had no idea what we were experiencing or what we were seeing was wrong. We did not. Things were accepted. It was just the way it was. He's just like that, et cetera, et cetera. Looking back, do you remember anything, or was it that hidden? Because a lot of this was behind closed doors.
All of the like illegal stuff or any type of like rape allegations or anything, that was like
just the harassment in general.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I had any clue what was happening was as bad as it was. Right. It was kind of brushed aside as being like, oh, you're kind of creepy uncle at a wedding or something that's like feeling up your friend on the dance floor. Right. A bit more like Harvey, or that's Charlie. Charlie was a flirt. He was a flirt with a lot of the female talent. There would be new temporary assistants that would show up that would be like there for 3 weeks, that would be like 22 years old kind of thing. You're like, where did this girl come from? But I was so enamored to just be there and be working on this like daily TV show that I didn't really
Well, that's the point,
And I
Andrew.
was
That's
so
what
late at
happened.
that point. The Harvey stuff, I feel like Miramax, as big as it was becoming when I started, because they had just started doing big movies like Chicago and Gangs of New York and Aviator and Kill Bill and whatnot. It was still a small company, and Harvey was very active and very there. Like he would walk around the floors, he'd sit at people's desks if they weren't there and look at their emails
Oh,
and just be, but kind of as like a joke. But
but not.
he was going through his divorce at one point, and it's funny because I ended up meeting Georgina later when I was at Vogue, but like it it just all seemed like I saw a lot of consensual flirtation happening between multiple parties. Let's put it that way.
Well, the
But nobody,
consensual. But Andrew, that's the thing is that anyone working for him, you feel like you have to flirt back.
of course, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
exactly, especially if you were
Consensual.
oh, the consensual in quotes, because
Yeah.
I'm sure these people were their agents were also pressuring them go to dinner with him, do.
Yeah.
But
did you see the anger? Did you ever see the outbursts?
Yeah. Well, I remember because the young people, we would often be Meryl Poster, one of the producers there, would have like test screenings for all the assistants. And then they would ask, Harvey would come in, they'd ask people for notes. Basically, like, did you like this movie? Like that, because it was a movie they were trying to figure out because it was not landing in post-production.
Right.
No one would be giving notes, and I'd be like raising my hand, being like, I think there's too many montages. There seems to be like 5 too many montages. And then he would get really angry and say something bitchy. But then she or someone else later would be like, thank you, we need people like you that actually talk,
Wow.
speak up. But yeah, so I don't know. It's hard to reckon what a monster he really was. I think the thing that makes me sad is there's so many people and creatives that were involved in all of these projects that sometimes the whole project gets tarnished and because of one person. And I think it was a very exciting time in film, and I worked with very exciting people. People thought, unbeknownst to me, that I was related to Tim Bevan, who is like the producer of like Bridget Jones and hundreds of movies, because Hannah Minghella, Anthony McDella's daughter, worked there. There was like multiple Nepo babies that worked there. So people were really nice to me for like a year without me knowing that they thought I was. And I think someone at one point asked me something about. I have an Uncle Tim who is an engineer in Seattle. I feel
like you must have said something.
Said something like, yeah, my Uncle Tim.
That is.
And then you see things in retrospective. I did so much work with Miramax Books, which had been started by Tina Brown and had left. And
of course,
it was really high profile projects by politicians and whatnot. Madeleine Albright, Giuliani, when he was America's hero.
Right.
So I spent time at Giuliani in his office. I feel like I traveled Madeleine Albright, which is just insane to think about. I was 21, 22.
But what was your position to be doing all of that?
I was like a production coordinator, so I was dealing a lot with the actual manuscripts. I think early on, the company saw that I wore many hats and could do it. So I would get borrowed by the PR department. I'd get borrowed by different departments. But I did a lot of photocopying, which does not exist nowadays. But I was so proud to do my photocopying, and I'd have 20 scripts of Kill Bill with everyone's notes on them. And then I'd make one master script, and I'd sit in a conference room and be like crossing things out. And they let me order sushi because it'd be like 10 o'clock at night.
Harvey and the sushi.
I felt like no job was too small. I thought, like, I'm part of this. This is a house of cards, and I need to exist for all of this. So I never felt lesser than. Speaking of fashion, I always like overdressed for work. Everyone was wearing like hoodies, and I thought I was Carrie Bradshaw, and it ended up being a bit of a icebreaker because people that were much higher up that probably would not have talked to me would talk to me in the kitchen, and they might have been slightly making fun of me, being like, nice pink tie or something. But I would be able to talk to them, and I was very I couldn't afford like Dior Homme, but I would go to like St. Mark Street and I would like recreate these outfits, and other people would think it was Dior and I wouldn't correct them. And I did that, I think, my first year at Vogue too. So fashion started to play a role because it was not a fashion driven company
right.
at all. I finally left because I wanted to become a playwright and also still pursue acting.
Well,
So
now you're surrounded by it so much.
yeah,
I'm sure you were like, oh my God, I could play the role of,
yeah.
Travolta in Pulp Fiction.
So for I think 9 months, 10 months, a year, whatever, I did a Chekhov intensive. I did a trapeze course for some unknown reason. Um, and then I worked on my play. Meanwhile, my family was really upset. My mom was like, we spent all this money in college. I was really moving up in Miramax, and that clearly wasn't being strategic on what my next move was, and was basically, you would have thought I went to go work at a gas station because my mom was just like, what are you doing? I was just like going to these auditions, and I'm like, I don't want to spend 8 hours in an audition,
Right.
4 times a week waiting in line to only get into a chorus 10 years from now. Like I was like,
Right.
I'm never gonna make it on Broadway. I kind of veered away from it, and I was home in Colorado, and I got an email from someone at Full Picture PR that I had met at a party like years before, saying you should consider this job at Vogue. And I was like,
What was the listing? I don't even know.
I don't even know either. And so it was Christmas break, I remember, and I sent in everything, and then I got a call saying, can you come tomorrow?
Was that from me?
I think someone was setting it up, or HR.
Okay.
Can you come tomorrow? And it was like December 26th or something. There was a blizzard in Colorado, and I said, I'm snowed in. The airport's closed for 2 days. And then the person on the phone said, well, this is going to greatly affect your chances.
Well, because I think
And then I got like
now
an
I kind
email
of
saying
remember it.
something like, enjoy your ski vacation or something. But this is where the folklore of me coming from the boat from Colorado comes
Okay.
from, because I was an out of work actor slash writer, in Colorado for 2 weeks. And yeah, but I took the first red I could get out of, and I went to the interview. It was, maybe a year after The Devil Wears Prada, the movie, had come out.
So you met with HR first?
I think I met with you first, actually.
Oh. Yeah, so tell me, because I don't even remember this.
But I wore black vintage Jean Paul Gaultier sailor pants.
Yep, I remember those.
And I
felt like it was a wide collar.
Blazer,
wide collar, I
think
think.
it was a blazer with a big collar, or the shirt had a big collar.
Yeah, the shirt
there
had
was
a big collar.
some element of flannel, like I was wearing like a flannel tie or something, because that's something that always stuck with you for years. That I wore a flannel shirt and khaki pants. And I'm always like, I would have never been hired. The case.
Well, by me, you probably would have, because I'm from public school too. I'm from the hood.
I also think I came in at the end of many interviews, and I think there was some fatigue of the last few weeks of not finding the right person, and Lori and Anna not liking the people or something, because you were like, okay, this is the guy, and then you said, this is what's gonna happen. Lori's gonna call you in tomorrow, and you need to go home and read every single newspaper front to back. You gave me basically a cheat sheet, because I think people had been turned down because they didn't know current events.
Yes,
and Lori Jones, who was the managing editor for many years, right? She was very old school, and she was very tough, and she I think wanted to kind of stump people, and she wanted to ask non-fashion related questions, non-entertainment related questions.
Yeah, I must have gotten feedback from either her or Anna, because after you, I remember different critiques of the people I wanted, to the point where Anna was like, fine, Jill, you're going to have to deal with her. So just hire her then, because I was like, I have to sit next to this person. It's about chemistry to me.
Yeah, we were also in very confined environment.
Yeah, like I have to be able to not want to kill the person. So for me, that was the key, is the vibe. And I was frustrated when, I'd go in there. What happened? She's not getting it. It's like, Jill. She didn't know any of the photographers we use, or it was all these
Yeah.
little things. That's why I was like,
Well,
please.
I just remember Anna asking me about who I would want on the cover, and I said Natalie Portman. And at that time where even someone's project had to be very specific to like the Vogue aesthetic and the
Right.
Vogue thing. And she was like, for what? They told me that Natalie Portman had been booked for Where the Heart Is, where she was pregnant in a wall pit.
Oh my God.
And
Don't bring that up.
Not very Vogue. is
We
what
did
I'm
Ashley Judd. She was
Oh,
in that
exactly,
film.
John, yes.
Yes, it was but Natalie, I wanted her. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that was
It was
such
a whole thing.
It
But
was a whole
anyhow,
thing.
she asked me who my favorite magazine writer was. And this is a time I'm like 24. I wasn't looking at bylines.
Right.
Bylines didn't mean anything to me. But I said Anna Quindlen, who wrote an article at the end of every Newsweek, and she had many books out. She's like, and it goes, well, she's an essayist. Which is not wrong. She wrote an essay at the end of Newsweek. And then I was asked if I read The New Yorker and who I liked at The New Yorker. And my mind went fully blank. But I had been to a wedding like 2 weeks prior where I had danced with the poetry editor at the time at The New Yorker named Alice Quinn. And so I said Alice Quinn because it was the and she goes, she's a poet.
Oh my God.
I'm never getting this, but I do.
You got grilled more than I did when I was being interviewed to be her assistant. But I do see they wanted this position. I was taking a head count. There was no head count before for me. Someone must have combined assistants. Maybe when Andre didn't need full-time or something had happened in the features department. And I had really needed someone because by that time I was booking at least 11 covers a month, not to mention everyone that wasn't a model within the magazine. So that headcount person had to have potential, right? To stay.
I was also told multiple times that I would be fired if I showed up in page 6 and that I was not to be the story, that I was to blend in the background. And I was like, why am I going to end up in page 6?
It's because who I had in my office.
I know. So I was like, okay, take note. No page 6.
That is too funny.
But yeah, I didn't fully know what I was getting into. I think but it worked to my advantage of being, a bit green. I was there to learn. I also kind of looked at it like, this is going to be my Vogue University. It's going to be like my 2 years here. I never imagined I'd be in a company for like 10 years. I really did want to work and I really did want to learn. And I wanted to earn attention. I also wasn't looking for a husband. Like it was the end of that era where there was a lot of women that would work at Vogue and they were socialites or they were looking for.
We had Lauren DuPont there who would never even pick up her paycheck upstairs.
Right.
Because she didn't need it. Tinsley Mortimer was there for a hot second in the beauty department. Yeah, there was always like different socials that were somehow
I definitely
working in quotes.
I'm going to work here for 2 years and then I'm going to produce my play, which clearly never happened.
So what do you remember from the beginning of your time with me?
The beginning, I was told not by you, but by multiple people, including like Eve McSweeney, who was the features director at the time, that I was too downtown. And then later I was like very Brooklyn because I moved to Brooklyn and it was a shock and horror to everyone. But meanwhile, 2 years later, they did massive like Brooklyn photo shoot.
Wait, was that because of what you're wearing?
I think a little bit of both. But then Eve said one time I was too paper magazine and I must have looked sad or something. And she goes, no, I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm saying that we need more of you here. Like, this is a good thing. Use it to your advantage. And I think you said very similar things of kind of like, don't try to blend in for the sake of blending in.
Well, that wasn't going to help me if you blend in.
No.
Right? Because we needed our section to be downtown, cool, the cool kids get in there.
And we were like screening celebrities, basically, like having like meet and greet dates with people, trying to like. And I do remember having some first initial meet and greets, and it must have been when you were out of town or on set, and
Or just didn't want to go because I
I didn't
hated
want to
doing
go.
them.
Yeah. But I remember people being a bit pleasantly surprised or shocked because I think they thought it was going to be really scary, and then I was like, "Hi."
So what were the first things we were doing when you first started? Do you remember, like, because
So you had just wrapped up, I think, Jennifer Hudson cover shoot, which was a really big deal and also was a surprise, right? Or wasn't meant to.
yeah, right, because
But it
that
was
was
also your gut instinct and Andre's because it had to go to print before the Oscars, obviously.
yeah, I'll tell you about that because I do remember pretty clearly that we were doing the Power issue portfolio, and I obviously wanted her. And on that set, again, it was supposed to be an inside shoot, just a couple pictures with Annie Leibovitz and Edward Enninful. And because it was an inside portfolio, we were fine with using her hair and makeup. It was just a couple pictures. It was going to be in the portfolio. But when she showed up, she looked so damn incredible. I called Anna. I said, "This is a cover. Like, she is unbelievable." I mean, it wasn't even just what she looked like. She looked gorgeous, but also you felt a star walk in. I just was like, we have to try a cover. And so Anna said, "Fine, Jill, we can try." But what that meant was we needed a cover team. I know Jimmy Paul ended up coming in, I forget for who came in for makeup. But if this was now turning into a cover try, we had to get a hair and makeup team that was Vogue level and who could work with the light that Annie was going to do, which was different for a cover. So that all happened within the day. We told Jennifer we're going to do a cover try, but I never tried to be too excited because I don't know. And the disappointment is so much worse than the surprise,
Of course.
if you get it. So it wasn't until shortly before the Golden Globes that it went to print. So it was sealed. We knew she was going to be the cover. And I saw her at the Golden Globes, the after party. So she had won. And I told her she was going to get the March cover. And she started crying. She's like, "Now this is the award I got tonight," was hearing this news. It was pretty great. But yeah, that was kind of crazy when you're doing a portfolio and you don't have a cover yet. And a similar thing happened with that April issue in 2008 with LeBron and Giselle. We're kind of just going with it and hoping maybe something will come out of this shoot and a cover will appear because we just didn't have anything set at the time. And what do you feel like you did most of the day if you were describing to someone the day in the life of my assistant?
I think we did a lot of research. There was screenings. There was I did a lot of stuff at night where I'd go out and listen to bands. My personal thing, which you didn't really handle that much, it was more Valerie and people were talking about, but music, because the music wasn't that cool. And I remember getting like a couple bands in there that I was so proud that I got this like postage side stamp article that I'm like, some lady's gonna buy this CD and like not buy the Kenny G CD or
Well,
something.
yeah, technically we were supposed to be handling the people are talking about section. So I was probably like, "You like music? Go for
Yeah.
it. Go see these things." Like,
And that
tell
was
me.
sort of like, it was getting kind of like the keys to the castle a bit in the sense of the access. I started going to concerts, going to movie premieres and movie screenings and stuff. And you were very good at, and still like emotional when I think about this, because, and my boss at Miramax was very similar, like introducing me as their colleague at like when we were in social events and stuff.
Yep.
Like that to me, because I obviously had to earn that by like earning your respect and by working hard and having a sense of taste and dignity and whatnot. But that was a huge deal for me because that made me feel A, that I belonged, and B, that I wanted to work harder and that I wanted to,
No, that's what I
not
always
let you
did.
down and
Yeah.
not,
That's what I thought was important, and I always did that. And even with interns, you were an extension of me, and I trusted your taste, your work ethic, your presentation, as someone that worked at Vogue. And
Mhm.
there's two reasons. I mean, I needed you to do a lot of stuff, and you had to be my colleague, right? Not my
Yeah.
assistant. I can't be sending my assistant in my place. And the other thing is, I wanted you to feel empowered. I
Right. And
wanted
I
you to
did.
feel empowered. And you were still expected to do the shitty stuff like get my lunch or like personal things here and there. But as long as someone didn't get a big head by that gift
You
and
still need to know know your place or know where your bread is.
yeah, like
Think.
outside of this office, you can be an editor. Inside this office, you're my bitch.
Yeah.
Like, let's be clear. No, but also we became close friends. And that's another thing I was told many times by many friends that how I acted with my assistants was not the way I should, that assistants shouldn't be friends. There should be nothing personal between you and your assistant. And I failed every time. I'm just not like that. We're so close, how we sit. We're together every single day. You're going to hear conversations. I'm going to be emotional about a breakup. We don't have separate offices. You're sitting next to me and I'm trusting you. And I don't know, there's no way for me not to have that become a relationship. And I can compartmentalize where in the office, I'm going to talk to you like you're my assistant, but we're still going to have dinner together. You know what I mean? And that can be confusing. And it's something that an assistant can take advantage of. But I was lucky that if that happened, it was rare, right? That someone confused that relationship. But
Yeah. I also think you were how do I put this? I remember things like I needed to go to the fashion closet and get Lanvin shoes or something, and I like mispronounced it on the phone, or I said, "Do you have the Lanvin shoes?" But you were never like, "Ugh." That was my like, how do you spell Gabbana? Delaware Prada. You were never judgmental about shit like that because what you wanted were standards and like work and like making sure that we were a team as far as what was being brought in and what needed to be done for the shoots and the organization of when the interviews were or any type
and
of
having my labels be the same font on the
yeah,
file
yeah, exactly.
folders.
But you weren't like, oh, this guy's an idiot because he can't pronounce Lanvin.
Well, I connected with you because I probably didn't when I
Yeah.
came in, you
And
know.
we were working. I mean, it's funny to think because I'm happy that I didn't have Instagram at the time or Google was around, but we weren't like Googling people. I didn't really have a sensibility of who everyone was. I didn't understand how many kind of legacy Nepo babies worked there and people's last names were very prolific, but I never put it
Right.
together that, oh, it was the actual family
Exactly.
the Simon and
Exactly.
Schuster heiress or the Rockefeller heiress or whatever. So I kind of like that I was naive in that regard. Um,
Was there anyone that came in for a meet and greet that you were starstruck by? I can't remember who came in during that period.
I think what's interesting is that I learned very quickly and also learned from you of this sort of not being able to necessarily describe it. And it probably is something natural in me as well. Of knowing when somebody has like it. I mean, they talk
Mm,
about casting directors talk about it because I inherently like everyone or I can be charmed by people, but I had to learn how to have a more discerning eye. And I think when you have 5 a week, you then know, okay, this person actually does stick out. I just remember meeting people that were just starting out in their career for people are talking about section, like an Amanda Seyfried who had only done Mean Girls, came in a hoodie kind of thing. Jessica Chastain was still at Juilliard, but she was doing a stage reading with Al Pacino and Diane Wiest on Broadway. And she came in and was like a theater student. And it's
right.
funny because the same week, Christina Hendricks from Mad Men came in, and they both have red hair, and a Mad Men blew up. And then for like a year and a half or 2 years, I was like, I wonder what happened to that other redhead. Jessica Chastain had filmed 3 or 4 movies in one
Oh my
year,
God.
like Tree of Life, The Help, whatever. She came out of the gates like 2 years later as this massive star.
Well, and I can only remember that I probably said to you, "Oh, we have another meet and greet. You do all the talking," and then I probably talked forever.
Totally. But or sometimes I would bring someone in to meet you afterwards. And that's a very rare account. But if you would like someone, you would make sure someone else in the office met them. Great.
Okay, so I would
funny.
have you meet them, and if they were good or whatever, you could bring them into me, and then I would meet them. Okay. Oh my gosh. So it was like
you really like someone, you would be like, you need to meet Tawny Goodman, whoever was like in the office and available, or sometimes Anna, but that usually would be another scheduled.
Do you remember any of those people?
I mean, I don't remember who kept making it through the pass, but I mean, I remember funny things like Katie Holmes, married to Tom Cruise, came in and we took her to Anna, and it was July and she was wearing all wool because I think she was up for like a winter cover. So she like
I remember that, and she did not speak in that meeting, and I was like, please. So I had to keep asking her questions and then asking Anna questions. So without me, there would have been no conversation. Yeah. I would say, oh, Anna, Katie, blah, blah, blah. Oh, Katie, Anna loves that. Like, it was basically just me talking. Right. But I was like, please talk. But you had a funny story you reminded me of that I did not remember about Amy Winehouse. Like, I know for sure if it was anything at night, I was like, you have to do it. But
so I think Jonathan Van Meter had like tipped us off that, oh, this person is coming from England. They're going to blow up. And obviously, like, music and hype traveled a lot slower back then. So someone could break in Europe and it would take 2 years for them to break here. And I remember there was a blizzard or something and we were all leaving and you go, I think you need to go to this. I'm not going, but you need to take these tickets and go. And still no context, like did not know. I was like this jazz singer. And I remember asking my friend to go and she was like, I don't want to leave the house. And I was like, come on, let's go. And still to this day, my friend who never goes to concerts, she's like, thank God I said yes to that concert because it was in like a very small room in the meatpacking district.
Yeah. That's how these little listenings are.
Yeah. There, and it was incredible. She was at the peak of her voice was at the peak. She was not in any dark days. And
yeah, because a lot of times for me, it would be, let me first look at them and see, and when I say, are they Vogue? You know, I can't describe what that is, but let's just say for me, how I did it was, can I picture a shoot? Can I picture them in a story when I'm flipping
how can you actually pitch Anna?
Yeah. Either they're stunningly beautiful or they have a look that is different and stylized, right? Or they are just so fucking talented. There's no one like this ever. Does not matter what they look like. Their talent will make them a superstar.
I feel like you and I had a running joke because you were always like, I don't want you to write a book about me. And then we would joke around that.
Is that after Devil Wears Prada came out?
Yeah, and I never signed an NDA. So, and I was like, I'm going to write a book called The Devil Wears Cocoon. I was like, The Devil Wears Prada, whatever. I was like, it's all about The Devil Wears Cocoon. And I would always be like, Jill, I'm taking notes. But we have very good chemistry, but there's something sort of Gilmore Girls about us because, which like neither one of us watched because we were too busy working and being out.
Right. I want to talk about some of the covers because now that we've narrowed down the covers, you definitely have different memories. And I'm older, and I was at US Vogue for 20 years and booked covers for British Vogue for 6 more. What are the covers that you remember? Any craziness? I'm sure there was craziness.
I mean,
Charlize.
The Charlize Mario Testino cover where it was cowboy themed. And
that was October 2007. But for everyone listening.
It was based on Giant, the James Dean, Marilyn Monroe film. I remember being very much a part of the pre-production in the sense of sitting in the room with you and I'm sure Tawny and kind of going through the references but I think it's because you were somewhere else.
You always say that. I think if you could do it, I'd be like,
but
just
somehow I got tasked with finding Cowboys.
Yeah, I'm sure I told you should do it.
And it was for me because I felt like it was like, this is all you, buddy.
Yeah, of course.
And then meanwhile, I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to do this. And maybe it's because I was from Colorado, but I just started calling like rodeo foundations and making cold calls to try to find cowboys. But the problem is, cowboys don't really care to be in Vogue. It doesn't do anything for them or their career. And people kept asking, like, what are they going to be paid? And then I remember sitting in a meeting once and Anna being like, why do they want a fee? And I was like, oh, because I was thinking, this is Vogue. I have to find the best cowboys in the world. So I was finding these like rodeo champions. But then their agents got involved, basically being like, well, you need to pay them dollars. And I think the model fee for the day in general at that time was like $200 a day or something.
If that. Yeah.
So there was this kind of back and forth, and me trying to explain to a room full of people at Vogue that Vogue didn't mean anything to cowboys. We weren't going to pay for their travel or something.
Of course not. Extras.
So my mother's cousin was like a surfing cowboy in real life, rode horses, and Tawny loved him. Like I showed pictures and she chose him, and I think he brought some friends and stuff, but it was like a 3-day shoot. But I remember Tawny being like, I love the cowboys. So then I had to help find monks in Sienna Miller's Rome story or something.
Oh my God. Yeah, another one. I said, oh, Andrew can do it. He was
But
great
it was
with the
also
cowboy.
like it shouldn't necessarily have come down to like us, because it seems like something, like you said, it's just extras. It's not talent.
Yeah.
But I took it very seriously. And then when we went into Penelope Cruz, which is like such a memorable
Oh my God. I told Tawny if I had to choose a shoot that still gives me nightmares today, it was that one. It was so
it was also like
traumatizing.
months of prep. But again, Matadors. And there was one Matador that I think Penelope had wanted, or Annie or someone.
Yeah, Cayetano, who we booked, and then he got injured. I found that out watching the news when I was in Madrid. He came up on the screen because we had come a couple days early. That his team did not reach out to tell me he had been bounded or gored.
Right.
They I think they were thinking maybe he'll be better in time, but he's in the hospital with a horn had gone through his inner thigh, like could have killed him if it went through the main artery. So it's like me finding that out and the time difference between where I am and you guys. So I'm taking care of Penelope. We were supposed to shoot her sister. We have a flamenco dancer. Her brother was supposed to be in it. And now we lost the Matador and his four, or the Picaderos. And, they were major in the first 3 shots. Right. So
I just remember we didn't necessarily know the full extent of the Matador culture. We were emailing all these guys, and I was finding backups eventually at one point. But I remember you calling me, and I was in LA, and I went to the Emmys with my mom. And I remember you saying, you're never going to believe the amount of paparazzi that's here. And I assumed it was because of Penelope and Javier. And you were like, it's for the Matadors and their entourage, because it was like...
Well, I was in Ola magazine because Cayetano, the Dangerous Summer, is based on his grandfather.
Oh, right.
So he's a big deal there. He happens to be family friends with Penelope. She is very anti-bullfighting. That's why there was no bull at all in the whole shoot, or even referenced, like no tail or like horns. But she trusted Cayetano. So that's why he was the only Matador. And I remember, since you were away, I think we had our intern, who's now entertainment director at GQ, but she was our intern. I never remembered her name for some reason.
You call her my intern. Like Andrew's intern.
Oh yeah, where's your intern? Ask your intern. So I remember then she was the one on the ground also trying to find these Matadors. The problem was she would call a Matador. That Matador, out of respect for Cayetano, would call Cayetano and ask if it was okay with him for this Matador to take his place due to his injury. And Cayetano would say, no, I'm doing it. So we couldn't get a backup. We have a guy with a major wound hours away. So it ended up working out. But all that stress with a different language, you being my right hand, that time difference, it was...
Also, we shot it in September, And so all the prep had to happen in August, and we shot Penelope with Almodovar and his muses,
Yes.
and all of the and we were trying to organize this shoot in August and try to get all these people. Almodovar had already said yes, but then they drop off in August completely.
Right.
And then I think you had vacation, and we obviously didn't take vacation at the same time. And it was like August 15th or something. And Anna called me into her office being like, what's the update with? I had called Spain every single day, 5 times a day. I had been emailing. It was like, we need updates. And so then I would be told that like, Anna needs this right now, which is not even a lie. It's something you can't use when you leave Vogue, sadly. And no one was even checking email. And she could not understand. You have to get an answer by the end of the day.
Oh, it's not. Yeah. Oh my God.
But I mean, it was a great, I mean, it was a great shoot.
So then we have the two other shoots I remember that you brought up that I had forgotten about. The Winona Ryder, and I did speak to Tani about this one. I forgot that we were together, that she did not show up for the first day of the shoot. I remember.
I don't think she called in sick 2 days in a row.
We got her back. We could have rescheduled for that third day. Maybe that's what happened. I know for sure that I was on the treadmill at L'Ermitage. It was probably 6 a.m. And I get a call from her publicist, who was in New York at the time, saying that she woke up not feeling well, so she's not coming. And I'm like, okay, we can push back the call time. What do you mean? Like, she woke up not feeling well? Like, okay, go back to sleep for a bit, and all you're going to have to do is lay in the grass. Like, it's not like we're asking you to run a marathon, but she did not come. So it was just mayhem trying to figure out what to do. We had all the production set up, had paid everybody. So somehow Tani got Amber Valletta to come and do the whole shoot. So at least we had a cover shoot. And Winona did end up coming. It could have been 2 days later or the next day, and we still had the whole team. So it ended up being one of my favorite covers, but she did not seem sick at all when she showed up.
Right, I remember you saying that. What I also loved about these moments is that it was almost like I was waiting for you to come back to war and like tell me stories, because you come back from these shoots that were multiple days, which is like now nothing is shot in multiple days.
Right.
And we would touch base here and there, but then I would be like, okay, tell me everything. Tell me all about and I think Winona looked really good in the thing, especially for someone being sick.
Well, I know about that shoot. The biggest issue was the interview, because we needed her to acknowledge the theft. This would be her first cover that she did after that whole situation. And I wanted to get it. When I want something like that, I will go in there multiple times against everyone. Sometimes I have to go around like I'm running for class president and get everyone's vote before the meeting and get their promise, shake hands, that when I bring up this idea and Anna asks people in the room, that they all agree with me. I had to do that a lot in preparation for a meeting where we were going to talk about covers. But we did have to figure that piece out. There was a lot of back and forth with the publicist. There was a lot of very specific questions that were approved or not approved. We needed it in the magazine. Of course, she didn't want to talk about it, but we negotiated something. So I can see why for Sally, being the writer, that wasn't ideal by any means, to be told how you can ask something and that's all she's going to say. But we got it. We got the poll quote, and that was that. Some of these shoots are super long, and it's not because of the talent. Like the Gwyneth Paltrow Iron Man, I remember Stephen Klein just couldn't figure out how he was going to do it. We had her in a look that was an homage to Iron Man, in the coloring and all of that. And this huge set was built in this like warehouse studio.
In the Bronx.
Yes, but it was taking so long, and she was all ready. She's asking me, so when are we going to start? We haven't done a shot yet. I'm like, oh, let me go check. Go up there, and they're saying...
He was like one of the most efficient people in general, I feel like. because with like fittings and everything, it was all pretty run by the book.
Yes, but it was taking
And she
so
was the
long.
first celebrity that I had ever seen have a body double. She sent a body double to do a fitting the day before, and it was like a Ukrainian version of Gwyneth Paltrow. Um,
But do you think it was one that we got? Did we get a
no, I think it was from Gwyneth's team. I think it was the one that she uses for
yes.
movies.
Yes.
And I remember first being like, oh, that's so weird. But then I thought that's actually so genius.
A lot of them
Like,
have them.
Perfect mentions and everything and perfect coloring.
Yeah, a lot of them have. It's funny.
I remember
so tough.
the tension of that Gwyneth Stephen Klein shoot because the whole day went by, I think, and maybe one shot was done, maybe not.
Yeah, and I think probably just to have done one. Because I even called Valentino, my friend was working there, and had them send some bags over as gifts just to buy some time with her. Oh my God. And then it was a reshoot. We went with the original cover. That's what would happen. I'd have to call a publicist and tell them we have to reshoot the cover. So in order for them not to scream at me for more than a minute, I would say, listen, she looks really mean. She looks really mean in this cover. She won't be happy. And for Gwyneth at the time, looking mean was no bueno. I think some things had been said, so I knew exactly what to say to him. But then we ended up running the original. That happened to me twice.
Oh, man.
Where I have to say how bad the cover is. We have to reshoot, and then we run the original. Oh my God. And then
people don't understand how your job is so much like power brokering and like.
No, I know. So as always, I could talk to you forever about our years together, but I do want to talk about Teen Vogue. So I vaguely remember you leaving my office for a job at Teen Vogue. And of course, I was not happy about it because you're so good, too good to not move up the masthead. When did you decide it was time? I'm not sure if we had discussed you moving up, moving on, or if we had a plan. I feel like I was a bit blindsided by it, but I don't even remember the whole story.
I think you were blindsided by it, but I feel like because of politics in the office, I was first approached by Lori Jones about it, but I think I was told to be quiet about it.
Probably.
And I feel like Anna had told Amy Astley that you should consider this guy Andrew. I had no clue, and I only found this out like recently that it was like a job a lot of people had wanted, and they had interviewed a lot of guys.
Wow.
They wanted to make a boy about town. They were seeing people's interests obviously go more into zeitgeisty celebrities and whatnot.
And was it a style director? Was that the role?
Initially, it was, I think, style editor. But I feel like I thought it was going to give me a leg up by being internal and coming from Vogue. But I was representing Amy not necessarily being able to make her own decision. Like she had to meet with me because Anna was like, meet with this guy. I went out for that job around Thanksgiving. It was very quick. This is why you feel blindsided, because between Thanksgiving and Christmas is when I got hired. And then I started like January 2nd or something.
Right.
And you and I hadn't really talked about a plan.
But we still had the intern. So she must have moved up.
Yes.
So Dana moved.
I feel like you were blindsided by everyone, including me. And so I completely understand that. And I know that I was an asset to you, and we did have such a good kind of shorthand with everything. It was almost like we had just solidified a very like well-oiled machine.
Right. But looking back, I have to say that was the only way. There was never going to be a time where I was going to be ready to let you go because I don't like change. I was at Vogue for 20 years. I don't like change. So this was actually the best case scenario because you didn't get to a point where you wanted to leave. An opportunity came to you. So that's almost the best way to do it, to leave the party when you're still having fun, not when you start dreading it.
Anna's notorious for taking people and putting them in jobs, whether they like it or not sometimes. Like, oh, you're a model booker now, or you
Oh,
you
yeah.
work in publicity or you are an
Yeah,
event.
there's no version of you saying no.
Kind of.
But
And it
tell me,
ended up
yeah.
incredible. And I did get to see the world and I did get to discover a bunch of young new talent. And I did get to really carve space for myself there. It's not that it was the easiest path.
So let me ask you, now you're moving just floors within the building.
Yeah.
And Anna is still the head of Teen Vogue. So how was the culture in the office? Because we're only floors apart, but I can imagine either Amy is trying to run it like Anna, she was the beauty editor for Vogue for many years, or that she did it completely different. Like, I don't know. What was it like in comparison?
It was a run a lot like Vogue. It was the same sort of infrastructure. I think there was a little bit more creative freedom. There were a lot less hoops to jump through. I think what Amy and Anna were really good at were hiring people that they just kind of trusted. And much like you, it's like Amy didn't want to go out every night and like go to this thing. She had to trust me to be like, I saw this amazing band. That
So
doesn't
not
happen
as much
overnight either.
not as much micromanaging.
Not as much micromanaging. I had a lot of creative control that I think I took way too for granted because it is my first kind of senior editor position and it was a really small staff. So I could see a movie or meet someone for lunch and be like, I want to put them in my section. And that would just happen. And that is incredible. And I think it's something I really miss is having that platform, but I don't think that would even exist today, like in the sense of having that creative freedom. And it also took some trial and error because I would push for people and Amy wouldn't listen to me. And then they would break. And then she would be like, okay, I need to listen to this guy. And that was the beginning, the first few months of me trying to get my footing and trying to build that trust and me being more confident in how I pitch things, which I know from watching you, there's a very specific way to massage it, a way to be super diplomatic, but also very direct and be like, you'd be an idiot for not.
Right.
Like,
And
we need this now or you're going to miss out.
yeah. And what did your mother think when she sees that you have your own column, you have Life with Andrew, and then you create Teen Vogue's Breakfast with Bevan? Is she now seeing that the performance, the writing, everything you've done up to this point?
Together.
Yeah.
And I think the thing for me, which is hilarious, is that for a long time, I thought, like my mom or my grandma would call and be like, I got the issue of the magazine. It's amazing. You're not always thinking it's going out into the world. And it
right.
was like you finish your homework and then 2 months later,
yes.
And then I'd be like at a mall or a airport or something, and teenagers would come up to me and say, oh my God, are you Andrew Bevan from Teen Vogue? And,
oh my God.
And it would be this kind of amazing moment. And what I've learned, even retroactively, is that Teen Vogue had such a cult following pre-Instagram that people took it very seriously. It was their window to this world. And what happened to me 2 years ago in LA is I was at a Levi's party and this probably 32-year-old woman comes up to me and she's like, are you Andrew Bevan from Teen Vogue? And I said, yes. And she said, I was one of your biggest fans.
Oh my God.
Which is weird because I'm like, you're a grown-ass lady. But it made sense because she was like 10 years younger than me and she would have been 18 when I was 28. And so it just kind of, that makes sense. I became like Teen America's gay big brother.
Yeah.
But, I would have to go to these mall tours with Simon Malls where there'd be like a bunch of girls that would come out to watch like a back to school fashion show. But I felt like I always had a responsibility because I knew these girls, there'd be a kid from Oklahoma reading this magazine. I always wanted to really push the envelope as much as I probably could, but not alienate any of the readers that wanted to look at pretty prom dresses. But I wanted to get the girl with the shaved head maybe in the pretty prom dresses. And to me, it was all about finding nuance. And I think what ended up happening was that it became very political, performative pieces about whether it be like plus size models or whatnot. But it was a lot about, instead of just putting the plus size model in the magazine, it was like, look how great we are. We put this woman, and there'd have to be an essay attached to it.
So is that when you started seeing a change? Did that
Yeah.
happen and you were starting to feel
And I
like
think it's also when advertisers started seeing a change and not necessarily on board, because there wasn't enough nuance to straddle all this that's happening right now in culture with our regular readers too. And then I think the biggest change was that suddenly Vogue and Teen Vogue were competing for celebrities to be on the cover. And so that was very strange because...
And for anyone listening, that was because Vogue was going younger, not Teen Vogue going older. So it was Zendaya. There was these younger stars. You know, you have social media coming. You saw the attraction of these younger stars having millions and millions of followers. That became something we needed for advertisers and for circulation.
Yeah. So that was a major shift in Teen Vogue. And I think why Teen Vogue went away from a print perspective, because Vogue got younger and needed to, probably.
And then when did you decide to leave? Was there another job? As far as I know, you have been doing things on your own. You've had a lot of, you know, projects. You had the book. I don't know how far you are with it now, but so it's not like you went and did nothing. You didn't go to another job per se. It's funny
because I really resisted going, but what really was the moment was, and it's hilarious that the name of your podcast, because it aligns with this, is Kate Bosworth, who's a good friend of mine. We were developing a TV show that was about youth culture around the world. It was very Vice News for teens. And I was initially being touted as like the Anthony Bourdain of youth culture. And I was going to be on camera going to Korea and going to all these places. I eventually put myself in the background because I didn't want it to be about my reaction to it also happened. I'm like, the world doesn't need this white guy like
that's smart
talking to like tribes in Africa about menstruation. I was still going to be doing the interviews, but it wasn't going to be about me. We created a series called Teen Rogue because it was also about like me going rogue from fashion and going rogue from New York society and kind of out in the world. We got a deal with Universal. We had developed it for 3 years, maybe. Ended up getting another deal for a pilot with Freeform. And, you know, I'm super naive in all this, and I really wanted to go into TV development, not knowing how long everything takes and not knowing the rooms of old rich white men that want to do something disruptive, but don't want to pull the trigger and be
right. So they'll buy it and it'll sit on the shelf, which is completely
so many conference calls, like such an absurd amount of conference calls. I think something gets announced in Variety and in Deadline. I am celebrating, my family's celebrating, people are giving me champagne. And so I leave to go do this TV show. And then in the midst of that, started working with brands. I did end up freelancing Calvin with Raf, and I did enjoy working with brands. I wrote taglines for Nike. I felt like, oh, I have all this freedom.
Right.
And while I was working on this TV show, and I think there was a part of me saw, and I'm sure you can attest to this, some people that were still working in our industry in their 60s and just miserable and not happy and not having a 360-degree life. And
no, I always said that. And I've said this to other guests. Like for me, I did not want to wish away 5 days to live for 2. And when I spoke to Tani, we both realized that it wasn't a job. It was our life. Everything we did at Vogue, it was a family. It was your annoying sister. It's a profession that's over your life, and you almost live and breathe Vogue. It was like that. So it was hard to leave. But, you know, once it started changing and I started getting a pit in my stomach thinking about having to get on that subway, it was time to leave because life's too short.
I have FOMO for something that doesn't exist anymore.
Exactly, Andrew.
Or like people always say, would you ever go back or do you ever miss it? And I'm like, no, I miss, you know,
what it was then.
Shoots, and I miss small Met galas, and I miss this sort of almost feels homegrown at this point, almost feels more innocent or something. So to backtrack with the TV show COVID happens. We're shooting the first episode May of 2020. So that didn't happen. So then the whole thing ended up falling apart. But during COVID, I got long COVID pre-vaccination and I was so sick. And I watched The Crown for the first time and I started crying during The Crown because I was like, I miss Vogue. I miss Anna. There was something I like missed the idea of this sort of institution of being a part of this thing that did hold power. And I understand also now that things that I miss are very ego-centric. It's very related to ego because there's a shorthand of people like Andrew from Vogue, Andrew from Teen Vogue.
Right.
I'll go to something now or I'll cover something now. I went to the St. Laurent men's show in LA a couple years ago, and someone was like, "Oh my God, you're back." And I'm like, "What? You're still here?" I don't know. I didn't go anywhere. I just think it's interesting that whenever I go back to a fashion show or something, people are like shocked. Like
It's kind of like you did something besides this, like you
or that I've been in
left.
like jail for 5 years or something. But the thing is, in 2018 and 2019, I had to sort of figure out who I was. I had to figure out how I wanted to dress. There was a moment at Teen Vogue when brands were sending me really brightly colored, primary colored things and like orange suits and stuff. And it was like Calvin Collection or Dolce & Gabbana or something. And I felt like I had to wear it. And it became part of my brand in the magazine to dress that way because of color always looked better in shoots.
Right.
But I never really wanted to wear an orange suit. So I wore a lot of black in 2018 and 2019, a lot of Adidas track suits, like not track suits, just track pants. I kind of reclaimed relationships with friends because, as you know, you're in the tornado of this job. You lose relationships. You don't get to just be a homebody and like binge watch and stuff. I did all this stuff in 2018 and 2019 that people embraced during COVID. The irony was February of 2020, I was like, I'm going to say yes to everything this year. I'm going to put myself out there. I'm going to be more social. I'm ready now because it's on my terms.
Right.
And the pandemic happened. So, I don't know. But I think I've had these amazing experiences that I could not do with a full-time job. Like last year, I went to Italy for 5 months and lived in a small Italian village with like 300 people. And it was an incredible Diane Lane under the Tuscan sun moment.
Yeah.
I wanted to be freelance so I would be able to do this. And now I'm finally able to kind of
live life.
live life. And but the thing is, lately I've been craving like teamwork and like structured leadership, and I need you to boss me around a little bit. But
let's do it. So looking back on this incredible career, which is still going, I mean, I can't wait to see what chapters of Andrew Bevan's life come next. And maybe I will see you on the Great White Way. Who knows?
Never know.
But looking back at all that you've done and the people you've worked with some icons, me included. No, but who would you consider some of your greatest mentors? What advice do you carry on with you if you were going to give it to a younger Andrew who's at NYU right now? Are there any tidbits or words of wisdom, people that have really helped you along the way?
I mean, you obviously, that's an obvious given. I think even when we don't speak for multiple months, it's always, we have such a shorthand with each other. And I always joke that you would like bail me out of jail in 2 seconds if I was in jail.
Exactly. Because I'm like, I need you to do this. I'll get you out right now.
Yeah. And what's been interesting is over the last, I would say, 6 years post Vogue is when I become very close with Grace Coddington. We're now working on a project together. I see her a couple times a week. We go to dinner, we get drunk on Prosecco, we go to movies together. I was super close with my grandmother, so there's something really, but my grandmother had Alzheimer's, and there's something really just beautiful about my friendship or relationship with her and being able to gossip with her about because now I feel like she's at a point in her life and career where she is looking back a lot and she is very open. I joke around that she's sort of in her Fran Lebowitz phase where she doesn't kind of give a shit right now. I just love talking to her about like who looks good and bad on the red carpet, about all this sort of designer musical chairs because she's fed up with it all. And I like how honest she is because so many people are kissing each other's ass. I think it's ironic that I was more scared of her than I was of Anna. So I kind of stayed away from her. I didn't bond with her the way that I did with Phyllis or Tawny or Anna. And so I stayed away from her. But during my time at Condé, only in my last year at Teen Vogue is when I did a story with her and Tavi Gevinson, and we started to hang out. And one day Grace called me, and I think we were both sort of fed up with politics that were going on at Condé. And she was like, "Do you want to go get drunk with me and have margaritas?" Which she's never said that since.
I know.
And so we went to some kind of trashy Mexican restaurant and had margaritas, and then forever we became buddies, and it's very sweet. She's really been supportive, and I also like her because she always talks about how young I am, and I'm like, great, I'm in my mid-40s. But compared to me, she's 84. She's like, "You're so young." You know?
Yeah. And you did say something earlier, a piece of advice. What did you
A
say?
piece of advice from my boss at my polo internship was stop asking questions that you can figure out yourself, or know
Right.
to ask the question and know when to research. I think common sense too. I've had to like really learn about common sense and trusting gut instinct. And I think my sense of asking so many questions initially when I was young came from being a people pleaser and wanting to make sure I get it right. But I had to trust my own instincts. And then from like Vogue, obviously, we were talking about it before we started about it's being on time. And you taught me also a lot about being over prepared because you go into a meeting with 4 ideas. If they ask for 1, you go in with 4. And I still do that to this day. And as someone that does consulting for brands and stuff, you go into a marketing meeting with people that have been there for 20 years, that maybe have 2 ideas a year, and you go in with 5. Half the room loves you, half the room hates you and wants you.
Exactly. Exactly. No, I was very prepared in those meetings always because Anna will ask you everything. She will ask you questions until you can't answer one. And that can be asking you for September cover ideas 5 years from now. But
I will never forget that you said Anna will always ask you the one question you don't have the answer for.
right.
We'll find a way. So make sure you do it. And I'm like, what? Figure it out.
Right.
And I think we were trained initially that social media was like the devil or it was tacky and we needed to stay off of it. And there was a very slow transition to digital at Condé Nast. So I didn't harness that because I thought I was being a good little soldier. And it wasn't about me. It wasn't about me as a brand. It wasn't about what I could do to build my career. I didn't have that hindsight. And I guess going back into it, I would have been a bit more cognizant about it. I was so in the Vogue tunnel.
No, that's what we were told. We were supposed to be in the background.
Yeah.
But we were told to be too far in the background, not to ask for credit. We were the secret weapons. We didn't get the recognition. And that's really hard when you leave a place and you don't have all of that to show for it, right? Of course, we have all the magazines and we have all the
Well, you're still not taking enough credit that you deserve.
Right.
How you were trained in the trenches. I'm still bad at self-promotion and I'm still bad at giving myself enough credit. So I still need to take that advice. Another thing, I met Juliette Lewis at the first Met Gala that I did. And I got very close with her that night and we're still friends. But she said to me, you need to know who your friends are if you were to work at Starbucks tomorrow. It's sort of like who's in your corner at all times. And that to me has been pivotal.
I think that is amazing advice to end on. Juliette Lewis, she's everything. So I'm going to start thinking about that more too. But at the end of each episode, I like to ask my guests the same 7 rapid fire questions. It's a this or that. Okay, are you ready?
Ready.
AM or PM?
PM. But I'm trying to be AM. Not working.
Text or talk?
Text.
Uber or Subway?
Subway.
Book or film?
Film.
Sweet or spicy?
Spicy.
Spots or stripes?
Spots.
Top or bottom? It's not what you think it is.
What is it? Versatile. What does it mean? In what context? You can't tell me.
No, I like versatile. Let's keep it versatile. Andrew, I loved having you, and we must get Grace on here.
I love it.
Love you.
Love you.
Okay, that's our show. Thanks for listening to Going Rogue, and be sure to like and subscribe. Today's show is produced by me and Maddie Rosenberg at Radio Free Rhinecliff with assistance from Maddie Kelly. Special thanks to David Vo for our great graphics and Taras Romanov for our epic theme music. See you next Friday.